All right, so for everybody else there, listen up. We are immensely privileged this evening to have as our special guest the man for whom this conference is named and inspired. We have himself here, Mr. Gilbert Keith Chesterton.
Oh, thank you. It's only 3 steps, but I did it quite well. Such a remarkable crowd. I must thank you for that resounding welcome. It was deeply moving, and as you can probably tell, it takes a lot to move me. But your generosity of heart and hospitality is more than I had reckoned for. Ladies and gentlemen, honored speakers, it is a pleasure to see you all. Indeed, it is a pleasure to be seen. I can tell you, it is much better to be seen than it is to be viewed. Well, I can tell you that from first-hand experience. It is also quite humbling to see all the placards bearing my name and to hear such kind words spoken on my behalf, and to see so many good and generous souls gathered together here in this great northwest of this magnificent country for what could only be called a festival. In Latin, festivus, a feast day, a holiday. And so it is with great joy that we are all together for what one may call a Chesterton. As I stand here before you tonight, I am in a state of wonder, wonder that I am here at all. But fortunately, I am large enough to cover a great swath of territory. So I am able to inhabit 2 states at the same time. The great state of Minnesota and my perpetual state of wonder. Continuing on this theme of wonder. Oh, look, a beverage. How exciting. It's water. Apparently Hercule Flambeau is about. Continuing on this theme of wonder, you will most naturally wonder why any words of mine may be necessary after the beautiful words that you have heard by the most distinguished speakers that you have seen in this wonderful assembly. And yet, I must persevere. Men always talk to perfect strangers of the most important things. In a perfect stranger, you will perceive the image of man himself. The image of God is not disguised by resemblances to an uncle or doubts of the wisdom of a mustache. I have been asked to speak to you tonight about a little book I wrote, Saint Francis of Assisi. And I believe it is a tenet of the Franciscan order, why I am even here among you. I believe it is your love that has arranged it. Does not love celebrate the beloved? Does not love keep our friends and loved ones present in our life still after their passing? Did not our Lord offer us the most divine love in sending his Son to die for our sins? Could it be that love has a supernatural power far beyond what we could ever understand? Of course it does! Any man, woman, dog, cat, vegetable knows that. And so it is your love of the other, that has summoned me here, not some metaphysical mumbo-jumbo or jiggery-pokery. When I put together the words I think I need to speak to you tonight, I found myself in a great conundrum. I had to go back in my mind to remember, oh no, sorry, I kept thinking it was gin. Joseph, you couldn't do any better than the, no? All right, later. My fellow countryman, Joseph Pierce. Yes, a brilliant mind, well worth a woo. Oh, he just ran off. He'll be coming back with a tankard of ale. We must stick together, we mad dogs and Englishmen. My love for Saint Francis began at a very young age. I remember sitting at the foot of my father as he read to me the story of Saint Francis. My imagination was sparked into a fire when I pictured in my mind's eye this young princely figure dressed in shining armor with a silver helmet plumed with feathers and a sword on his side, riding atop a great battle horse, surrounded by his townspeople cheering as he paraded by in chivalric pageantry to defend his town. But I was quite gobsmacked when the narrative took a turn to imprisonment. I was in horror as he sat in this cell, deathly ill, forlorn, forgotten, helpless, and apparently hopeless. But my eyes went even wider as the narrative continued, and he returned to his town, where he took off all his clothes, gave them to the poor, put on rags, and went begging for bricks to rebuild a dilapidated chapel in the hills outside of town. So you see, my love of St. Francis began in my childhood and flowered into my adulthood as I entered the Catholic Church with St. Francis as my patron. Patron? I don't see. Oh, there you are. There's my patron. Dale Alquist, everyone, yes. Oh, yes, that's a who, at least a who. Yes. Oh. Yeah, he is responsible for all of this. The sponsorship, support of me, spreading my word. He is my dear friend. Yes, Dale Alquist deserves another clap. And because he is my dear friend, I shall now misquote him. As so many do with Chesterton. Yes, Dale Alquist once said, stop talking. No, Dale Alquist once said, stop giving me these ideas. I have a family to feed. No, Dale Alquist once said that St. Francis was probably the most popular saint, but probably the most misunderstood. Close? Right, good. And I could not agree with that sentiment more. A great disservice has been done to great Saint Francis in equating him with some sort of lover of nature merely. Yes? It's a criminal oversimplification. That criminal oversimplification has relegated him to the status of a statue, placed in someone's garden, holding a little tray for a bird bath or a bird feeder. You know, I think that place in the garden, that place of honor, has already been relegated to the common gnome. And I do not think they are any more pleased about the simplification of their persona either. In my little book, I refer to Saint Francis as the jongleur de Dieu. In the time of Saint Francis, there was a great movement about, the troubadour movement, a movement of poetry and verse that lit the fire later for the Renaissance to take place. The troubadour was a poet, a love poet, who traveled throughout the country as a minstrel, singing his great love songs. It is no wonder that St. Francis said that every friar should carry nothing with him but his harp, with which he is to serenade every cottage and castle with his song of the Creator's love. And traveling with this troubadour was the jongleur. The jongleur is best defined, I suppose, as a juggler, an acrobatic, a jester, someone who performed cartwheels and somersaults to entertain the comic relief, so to speak, for the troubadour. It is important to point out this relationship of these comrades in arms, or comrades in arts, really. Wait, a great blessing is upon us, and all things must cease to happen. This is going to make things more interesting. Let's just see how Joe did. Perfect. I'm not going to put this there, next to the water. It might get ideas. I will place it here, almost in sacred relation. Thank you, my friend. Now I've completely lost where I was. But that's not so unusual. You know, when I arrived here, waiting to come in, I was wandering around the kitchen back here. But I discovered that the kitchen is not a bad place to be. When they are preparing food, that is. They often leave it on a tray and walk away and... Seemed like the sensible thing to do. I was only thinking of your welfare, to make sure the food was safe. Back to the topic at hand. Saint Francis, as the jongleur, might have experienced at one time the very peculiar vision that an acrobat takes in. The moment they perform a cartwheel, and they see for a second the world upside down. I could demonstrate that physical antic for you right now if I had. Yes, you asked me to immediately, but let me tell you, my dear lady, I think I would need a great deal of rigging and hoisting, maybe a few strong backs. Otherwise, my cartwheel may be quite dangerous for you. Yes, you are in the front row. I think it's known as the splash zone. And I would hesitate to heave such a girth in your direction. So I will resist in that. But let me explain. In seeing the world upside down, man is at first terrified by this precarious position. He sees his towers and turrets all hanging, the trees hanging, the people walking by somehow holding on to the roof with their hair dangling down before them. It's a very frightening and alarming sight. But it comes with an immediate sense, after the fear, of gratitude. Gratitude that the world is still being held by this divine thread, that God has not let it go. And this gratitude, I believe, is the highest and holiest of all paradox. That man has accepted the fact that he has a bad debt, and he is grateful for it. He will be forever paying back what he cannot pay back, and what he cannot be expected to pay back. He will constantly be throwing things into the bottomless pit of unfathomable thanks. And along with gratitude, if that is the offspring of dependence, comes with it an even more important Franciscan tenet, and that is surrender. Complete surrender to God's will. For the man cannot assist God in righting the world. He cannot help him set it right. He must completely rely on God's love and mercy to keep his world from crashing down like a vast crystal to be shattered. And it was in this prison, this cell, that Saint Francis, surrounded by death and disease, dampness and dark, forlorn, forgotten, surrendered to God's will, which should not surprise us, because when we are brought to zero, that is where God is doing his greatest work. This slows me down. You're applauding for my drinking. Wait till you see me eat. It is a three-ring circus. Surrender to God's will. For in that time when he was alone and broken, God was building something new. In that time, or about that time, he was in that dark cavern or cave. He went through a revolution of a psychological kind, a profound and inward spiritual revolution. And in that brokenness, God began to rebuild him, to make him far greater. One might remember the story of Eustace Scrubb in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. He was de-dragoned by Aslan, stripped of pride, vanity, ego. I see your doubting faces. Well, I will tell you, friendly in your ear, something to look forward to. The celestial city does have the best lager ever tasted. They also have an excellent library. And so, it is in our surrender where God is rebuilding us. Many people say that true faith lives out on the edge of a limb. I suppose if you climb the tree of life and you get out on the top branch and you carefully shuffle your feet to the edge, holding onto the branch above, you are living in a great state of trust, yes. But your trust is more in the grip of your hand than it is in anything else. The real moment of faith is when, if asked by God, you jump off that limb. Then you are falling out of control, tumbling, as the jongleur, I suppose, relying completely on God's mercy and love to take control of your life. And it is very hard for us to give up control, I suppose. But that is what God uses suffering for. When you are broken, facing the tragedies of this life, that is when you can be the most grateful. For that is when God is rebuilding you into something far greater than you could ever imagine. Gratitude at the worst and lowest moment. I said something about a statue a minute ago. I'd like to go back to that for a second. I'll make a revolution. How should I say this? If the stone in the field, covered in brambles and briars, if that stone could respond to seeing itself made into a work of art, a sculpture on a pedestal, how grateful it would be. If that stone knew this was a process, if the stone had any rational thought, I know several stones who do have rational thought. I've been visiting with one in his room for a long time. If that stone had the presence of rational thought, then every strike of the chisel and strike of the sculptor's hammer would seem like a loving stroke of his creator in creating a work of art. We are made in the image of a divine artist, and we are his works of art. Saint Francis gives us this understanding that in our worst and lowest moment, there is only gratitude and surrender to God's will so that God may set at work within you. Duc in ultum. God is calling you to a deeper relationship, out into the depths. As he did with the fishermen of Bethsaida, who set out in the boat at stormy seas, and they came to a point where Jesus stepped out of the boat and walked on water and looked to Peter and said, "Join me." And it is at that moment, despite all rational thinking, despite all going on in the world, you have to make the decision to surrender to God's will and step out of the boat and ride on top of the tumultuous waves. God gives all to those who surrender all. Life is a battleground, I am aware. As in with a war, there are many difficult, tragic things that happen. But there are also great joys, also during wartime, that happen. The vocation of marriage between a man and a woman, as the Lord intended it. Seeing the birth of your children. The joy of the pipe, the pint, the friend who bears the drink. Even the little dandelion with its golden crown. These are all love notes that God is sending to us every day. So, amid the suffering, we will still understand that we are loved. So when you come to this time in your life, when you feel that you are suffering or persecuted, and believe me, if you are to live a Christian life, you are to be persecuted. Take it all as joy, brothers and sisters. For in that, you are being built anew, brick by brick, like a small chapel in a hillside town. You are being formed in steadfastness and let steadfastness have its full effect, for then you shall be perfect and lacking in nothing, as our great saint from Assisi was. Oh dear. Apparently I've gone on. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time and attention. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to seeing you later in the day. Right? Well done, cheerio. I'll get my drink. No, I'm sorry, I can't leave you. You are far too kind. Being among you is like being in the bosom of a large extended family without that one uncle. You know the one, the atheist? All you have to do is say, when he tells you, I don't believe in things I can't see, and you say, well, that's what faith is, and he stops the conversation immediately. But you have been so generous to me and so kind that I feel I must do something generous for you, but I refuse to do a somersault, as we discussed earlier, for obvious reasons. Not you. I'm sure you're quite athletic. I am, however, subject to greater forces of gravity than you may understand. Yeah, but something generous, something kind, something to pay back your hospitality. Do you know, no. In Shakespeare's time, during any one of his comedies, usually in Act 5, Scene 1, the twins are reunited. Hymen comes down from the clouds to marry everyone. Discord among the opposite parties is turned to harmony. And in appreciation for the audience, sitting through the entire event, they perform a song and a dance. Yes, they do. I shall sing you a song. And I shall perform something that looks like a dance, but is probably rather like someone falling to his death. You do know that I'm mezzo-tone deaf, right? Yes. What song? Joseph Pierce. Just speaking of Joseph. I was walking down the hallway trying to find my way before I ran into the kitchen. And as I passed one table, I saw the face of Hella Belloc staring back at me. I'll never forget one Christmas Eve he came to the house. He rapped on the door. I opened it, and there he stood wavering, as if a lost ship at sea. And he said, "Merry Christmas to everyone in this house." Boom! And collapsed face forward. Francis asked me who was at the door. I said, "It's Belloc." No, but this book, which you should all read, Old Thunder, also by Joseph Pierce, who mixes one of the finest drinks I've ever had. But is also a brilliant writer. I believe he writes a book about every hour. There's no stopping him. This book is called Old Thunder. Maybe some of you have already read it. Yes, very good, isn't it? Yes. And that's why I try to be seen with him. That's kind of a ghostly apparition. So I shall sing you the Pelagian drinking song by Hella Belloc. Did you say, "Oh dear"? I quite agree with you, madam. Oh dear, indeed. Well, anything worth doing is worth doing badly, eh? Oh, right then. Let me see. Well, one for courage. Bum, be-duppity bum, be-duppity bum, be-duppity bum, be-duppity bum. This is the good part. Be-duppity bum, be-duppity bum, be-duppity bum. Pelagius lived at Cardinal and taught a doctrine there. However you went to heaven or hell, it was your own affair. However you sought eternal joy or sank forever to burn, it had nothing to do with the church, my boy, but was your own concern. No, he didn't believe in Adam and Eve, he took no faith therein. His doubts began with the fall of man. And he laughed at original sin with a roti-toti-toodle-oo. He laughed at original sin. Then Cain, the bishop of old Auxerre, Germanus was his name. He tore great handfuls out of his hair, and he called Pelagius shame. And with his stout episcopal staff, so thoroughly whacked and banged, the heretics all both short and tall, they rather had been hanged. Oh, he whacked them hard and he banged them long, on each and all occasion, till they bellowed in chorus, loud and strong. Their orthodox persuasions with a roti-toti-toodle-oo. Their orthodox persuasion. Now the faith is old and the devil is bold, exceedingly bold indeed. And the masses of doubt that are floating about would smother a mortal creed. But we who live in sturdy youth and still can drink strong ale, right, Joseph? Right. We put it away to infallible truth that always shall prevail. And thank the Lord for the temple sword and howling heretics too, and every good thing that Christendom brings. Especially barley brew with a roti-toti-toodle-oo. Especially barley brew. Thank you. Thank you very much.